Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. The question why is a very challenging one to sit with. It's a natural question for me. Why is why not a good question? As I continue to work through this pathway and asking myself the question of how can I expand and come more into a divine conversation, divine guidance, and not necessarily lock myself into a place of needing to control and understand a situation, I've been exploring that pathway through this evaluation speech. And so on this one, I want to flesh out my why by focusing on a situation, an experience, a circumstance which brought me to Brazil. So I'd like you to take a moment and think about a time in your life when you found yourself in a situation or circumstance that really changed the way that you thought about the situations or circumstances that you find yourself in. Was it a pleasant experience? Were you able to process it in a way that allowed you to refine some thoughts and beliefs that perhaps weren't serving you anymore? Did you get trapped in your own way of just fumbling down the road of why? Well, when I went to Brazil, I had all of this happen. As some of you might remember, I went to Brazil after I had broken my face snowboarding as my brilliant plan to run away from paying for medical bills. Side note, it doesn't work. However, Brazil's beautiful. I was down there December and January. I got to spend Christmas and New Year's down there. Living in North America my entire life, being in South America during Christmas was super strange. Palm trees and beaches on Christmas did not go hand in hand for me. That has nothing to do with the speech, but it was just an interesting side note. So as I got to Brazil, the culture, the scenes, the people, the language, all of it was so different from anything I had experienced. I arrived in Rio and was able to stay approximately a mile from the beach. So we weren't directly in Rio, we were a little bit north of Rio, and staying in some condos. Rio's magnificent. It's a gigantic city. I am not much of a city person, although I'm originally from Los Angeles. My family lives in Northern California. I'm familiar with cities, but I don't love cities. And Rio is massive. One of the first things I noticed on our first road trip was these giant hillside slums called favelas. If you've ever seen a movie called City of God, you'll know that that is a place where the slums are magnified, and it follows the story of a boy and girl as they degrade, unfortunately, from selling drugs to murder. It's not an uplifting story, but it does reveal the power of the favelas. That's my first thing I witness. And it's being from LA, I feel like if that had been Los Angeles, a developer would have swiped the hill clean and built a $27 million home. But it wasn't LA, it was Brazil. So not having ever seen poverty like that, my eyes were opened wide. It was astounding. There were kites flying in the favela. And what I came to find out was those kites served two purposes. One was to communicate where drugs were being sold. So that would be the beacon, if you will, of being able to find where drugs were at. The second was a slightly more innocent game of capture, if you will, like a war game between children where they would put the strings of the kites, gluing glass on them. And then the game would be to see who could cut the string. And then if you captured that kite, you won the war for that day. Very different. I'd never experienced anything like that. So this was my first introduction to the poverty in Brazil, and it was a lot to sit with. I was only in Brazil, or in Rio, I should say, for 2 weeks. And then we ended up going north about 8 hours to a town called Espírito Santos. Espírito Santos, we were only about 3 blocks from the beach, and that's pretty much where I spent most of my time. And that's really where I got to start to dig into the question of why, but moving beyond the question of why into what is next? What am I doing? At this point, my problems are so up in my face, I can't even stand it. I don't speak the language, which worked out quite well because I couldn't eavesdrop on juicy, nectarious conversations that were happening behind me. I didn't understand what anybody was saying. But it also was time for me to sit and reflect with the soothing power of Mother Nature and the ocean. Poverty was still there. There was a young gal who used to work at a fish and beer shack, and she would walk down every day to work at the shack. There was shacks lined up all the way down the beach. And I'd watch her walk in as I sat there reading a book and just wonder, what was her life like? What was she doing? Where did she come from? I had a suitcase of clothing, and I had been wearing maybe a third of it, not much. It's hot, pretty much at the beach. I was basically in a swimsuit, tank top, and shorts most of the time. But I had a pair of Levi button flies and a white tank top. I had some crystal earrings that I didn't wear. And it turns out that I found out on New Year's, white is a really special, important color there. That's what they wear on New Year's to celebrate. It represents newness. Also, if you think about the color white, it's hard to keep clean. So it also represents the ability to have clothing that is challenging to keep clean. One day I brought her the jeans and I brought her the shirt, and she was so thankful, and neither one of us spoke the language, so it was just communicating through eyes of gratitude. But I'll never forget one morning as I was sitting on the beach, I watched her get off the bus and I watched her walk to the shack, and she was wearing that white tank top, the earrings, and those jeans. And I thought, holy cow, I have so much to be thankful for. This was just an extra outfit that I didn't need, and I probably had 1,000 more. Okay, I'm exaggerating. I didn't really have 1,000, but plenty more outfits back in the United States. And here this gal had so much pride as she walked in wearing her new pair of Levi button flies with a white tank top and earrings. So it got me into a position of asking, what's next? And for me, I knew going to school is what was next. I felt like I had been waiting for somebody to magically make my life work, even though that's not what I wanted to be doing, but somehow I had found myself on that path. Just please make it work. I don't want to put in the work myself. I enrolled in school. I knew that was my next what. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but fortunately we have a good financial aid system here, and I was able to apply for that to get full grants, full scholarships, and step into my next how and what, which was my academic career. Thank you so much, Madam Toastmaster.